Gooden has set a new Major League record for strikeouts by a rookie pitcher.
Darryl Strawberry's fourth hit of the night and his second two-run home run.
Fly ball deep to center. This is way out of this ballpark. Home run, Darryl Strawberry.
And Gooden strikes out the shot.
'Tis certain. Greatness, once fallen out with fortune, must fall out with men, too.
Dwight Gooden has committed additional violations of the Commissioner's Office drug policy.
Darryl Strawberry has admitted having a substance abuse problem and has requested assistance in seeking treatment.
Prologue.
Two households, both alike in dignity. Two teammates, both alike in artistry. In Flushing Fair, that's where we lay our scene. They wore the blue and orange with dignity. One numbered 16, the other graceful 18. From forth the close-cropped diamond grass that glows, a pair of star-crossed talents start their life, whose misadventured, piteous overthrows slash godly gifts with hands clutching fate's knife. The fault-filled scorecard of their damaged souls and the continuance of their fits of rage helped cause their fall from grace and change their roles. All this is now the traffic of our stage, the which, if you with patient ears attend, their saga will unfold and not offend.
Darryl and Doc arrived about at the same time to save a floundering franchise in the Imperial City. They were both tall, young, black men. And we had the enormous expectations that here was Joe DiMaggio and Bob Fella. Here were the next princes of American baseball.
For people that don't want to go to the New York City Ballet or go to the Metropolitan Opera, you know, the doings at Madison Square Garden or the doings on, at Shea Stadium or Yankee Stadium are vitally important and help them explain the world to themselves, their families, their friends. I think that's what Shakespeare does, and I think for a lot of people that's what sports does.
It's the play where they're always intertwined. You know, they're just Siamese twins. You know, they're joined at the hip. Doc and Darryl, Darryl and Doc. 16 and 18, the home run hitter, the power pitcher.
I think it could be seen in just a great dramatic, even Shakespearean sense, but it was this play that Shakespeare never wrote about tragic twins.
Act 1, Scene 1, 1983, Flushing, Queens. Shea Stadium, the home of the New York Mets. A sense of despair is in the air. Enter Darryl Strawberry.
One of the good things about being a really bad team the way the Mets were is they got the #1 draft pick. And that #1 draft pick was this kid out of Crenshaw High School in Los Angeles, and he was supposed to be the next Ted Williams.
If you're drawing a baseball player, what would he look like? He would have incredibly long, athletic, almost equine-looking legs. He would have, tremendous wingspan, if you will, and he would have this larger-than-life, implausible name.
And he flashes it deep to right field. See you later, Darryl Strawberry.
When he went to the plate, you knew it might happen. He was a more of it might happen now kind of player than did you see what he did. which may even be better because you're anticipating. When is it going to happen? When is he going to hit a ball further than any human being has ever hit a ball before?
Act 1, Scene 2. Darryl Strawberry, 1983 Rookie of the Year, stands stage right. Spotlight widens to reveal a tall, lean, 19-year-old pitcher standing center stage. Enter Dwight Gooden.
I was in spring training the year that they brought Doc to their first Major League training camp, and they assigned him number 60, which is traditional, a high number for a guy who's not going to stick with the club. Well, pretty soon number 60 became number 16.
Doc had this incredible delivery, I mean, which his arms would be hidden by the leg kick. That fastball would be on them so quick and would explode on them.
First time I ever talked with a batter about Dwight Gooden's curveball was Sean Dunston at Dodger Stadium. Sean looked around, found a Dixie cup, and just said, it comes in and then it drops like that.
This is the kind of pitch that makes you want to ride home to mom.
I remember the anticipation, the 1984 All-Star game. Now, he's 19 years old. He's the youngest All-Star ever. They're playing in San Francisco Candlestick Park then. It's kind of twilight. Comes in to pitch about the, I'm going to say the 5th inning. And 19 years old, strikes out his first 3 hitters.
On one particular opening day, Darryl knocked a ball right into a speaker at Olympic Stadium in Montreal. I mean, you know, these speakers were probably, 500 feet or something from home plate.
Swings it, it's a high fly ball deep to right field, way up off the roof. It hit the roof. It hit the roof of Olympic Stadium, bounds down into right center field. It is a home run.
The thing that I thought captured Dwight in '85 better than anything else was a remark by Jody Davis, who was the Cubs catcher at the time. And he said, you know, everyone in the league wants to get him. We really want to get him. We can't touch him.
He hath borne himself beyond the promise of his age, doing in the figure of a lamb the feats of a lion. He hath indeed bettered expectation than you must expect of me to tell you how. Much ado about nothing.
85 now. Mets going to St. Louis into Busch Stadium late in the year, and they need to sweep. 0-0 through 9, going to extra innings here. It was a night that time stood still for Mets fans because Darryl Strawberry gets up against Ken Daly. It was a gargantuan blast to right field at Busch Stadium. And the clock out there, clock's still out there. It knocked out one of the lights. It broke the clock. Time stood still. Mets fans were like, we have arrived.
Fastball, see you later. And Dwight Gooden is here.
On the west side of Manhattan in the 40s, there's a building facing the Hudson River with no windows on it, and it goes for about 15 stories, just brick. And at that time, they painted a picture of Gooden about 10, 15 stories high, pitching out over onto the Hudson.
Doc had a friend from Tampa named Troy. I remember once walking around New York with Troy. Just watching. Holy Doc.
Act 1, Scene 3, Spring 1986, New York City. Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden enter together, followed by a series of brash and arrogant men known as the New York Mets.
The image of that 1986 Mets team was, in a sense, a reflection of what the city thought of itself. Brash, arrogant, extremely skillful, and winners.
They were notoriously terrible on airplanes. An airplane was their frat house.
The wildest example of this excess that we're talking about occurred after the 1986 championship series with the Astros. The Mets were so delirious at beating Houston in Game 6, and probably one of the most exciting games I've ever covered in all my years of baseball. They were so consumed with their victory. Once that plane left the ground, the drinking was heroic. I hear there was girlfriend-wife swapping. The plane itself was torn apart. During that plane ride, apparently things got so crazy that the bathroom door slid open, and there was one of the players on the team who had his face in a pile of cocaine.
They thought they were indestructible and they could do this forever and just dominate. And it's a question of how many World Series that collection of talent was going to win. Was it going to be 3 or was it going to be 4? It was 1.
Thus far, our fortune keeps an upward course, and we are graced with wreaths of victory. But in the midst of this bright, shining day, I spy a black, suspicious, threatening cloud that will encounter with our glorious sun. Henry VI, Part 3.
Act 1, Scene 4. Late October, 1986. Canyon of Heroes, downtown Manhattan. Confetti falls from the sky. Entire Mets team under the New York spotlight. Dwight Gooden, noticeably absent.
Dwight says to this day that he was so drunk that he couldn't get out of bed. Now, that's what he says. There are people who say that Doc had been on an all-night drug binge, wasn't even home, was using drugs that morning, was right there, and just chose not to answer the door because of a party that was still going on. We'll never know the truth.
Darryl and Doc came to prominence and had the bad luck to come to prominence in New York when Studio 54 and cocaine and greed is good and people with money and people with celebrity were attracted to it.
Cocaine was in vogue. Cocaine meant success. Cocaine meant stardom.
I got a phone call from, I still don't know who this person was, and said, you're the guy who covers the Mets? Yeah. He goes, well, I'm going to tell you, Dwight Gooden is using cocaine.
Opposing players would say, you know, I was in Pittsburgh with this gal, and this gal was telling me that just last week when the Mets were in, she and Doc were doing lines of cocaine.
Everybody filed it away, but we could never pin anything down. He was the last guy that we thought was going to disappoint us that way. It was a great shock when the story broke in spring training.
Met pitcher Dwight Gooden begins treatment in New York City today for cocaine abuse. The 22-year-old Gooden entered a rehabilitation center voluntarily on Thursday rather than face suspension by baseball commissioner Peter Ueberroth.
I can't remember a more startling sports moment that I've gone through. Maybe those around the team weren't surprised, but you know, those of us who are naive and view sports as some great play that's fun to watch and have your peanuts and your beer. I mean, that was a splash of cold water.
It was kind of like like when you fly into New York, you're kind of over Allentown, PA, and it's like you've now begun your initial descent. We didn't know it, but in '87 we had begun our initial descent on Dwight Gooden.
Act 2, Scene 2. Flashback. Hillsborough section of Tampa, Florida. Home of Dwight Gooden. His father, Dan Gooden, on stage throughout the scene.
Dwight Gooden had what so many athletes don't necessarily have, which was an involved but not stage kind of father. He was very close to his father. They didn't have a lot of money. Early on, he realized that baseball was a potential way out for him.
It's a tough area. You know, I've been there and seen it. It hasn't changed all that much. There's definitely opportunities there to get in trouble. You don't have to go far to find it.
Eventually, enough people got to him and pressured him to at least try drugs. Doc finally caved into the pressure and ran into a drug dealer, who was only known to them or to me, as Doc related, as Hawk. And Hawk, like everyone else, knew who Doc was. And he says, all right, you want to try some? You want me to help you out? Okay, you go up across the street to that apartment 3, and someone will be there to take care of you. Meantime, Hawk made a phone call to the apartment and said, Dwight Gooden is on his way upstairs to teach him a lesson. That lesson turned out to be the most painful one probably of Dwight's upbringing, because he knocked on the door and there was a big burly drug dealer waiting for him. And Doc says, I'm here for the stuff. And as Doc recalls, that's about the last thing that he said. That's the last thing he remembers, is because he was hit so hard in the face. He literally had been punched unconscious by the drug dealer, and when he opened his eyes, Hawk was standing over him. He said, next time you come looking for drugs, I'm going to give it to you. Now get out of here, and I'll never want to see you again.
Dwight told me he first got involved with drugs after the 1985 season. He was the Cy Young winner, the world at his feet, 20 years old. Dwight was the kind of guy who never wanted to turn his back on his friends back in Tampa, never wanted to big league people, as they say. And he said he was introduced to it when he was invited to go to back bedrooms at these parties where they were doing cocaine. And just to mingle, to mix, to be one of the guys, to show them that he wasn't any different than the rest of them.
Act 2, Scene 3, April 1987. Defending world champion New York Mets re-enter. Dwight Gooden remains off stage at the Smithers Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Center.
Opening day 1987 was to have been one of the happiest days in the history of the franchise. They were going to raise the World Championship banner. It was, in fact, the opening day of the season, which meant that when people bought their tickets months in advance, they expected Dwight Gooden to go out to the mound and throw the first pitch in defense of the Mets World Championship. And everything was supposed to be perfect, except for the fact that Dwight Gooden was in rehab at Smithers. Darryl decided with Doc in rehab that as a show of support for his good friend, he would wear Dwight Gooden's uniform pants that day.
And probably deep down, Darryl knew that he had his own problems that he was masking at the time. And as it turns out, you know, Darryl never wanted to shy away from the spotlight. Responds with a 3-run homer, knocks in the only 3 runs of the game. Mets win 3-2.
I knew I made a mistake, and I regret it a lot, but I must turn the page once again because life goes on, and I want to put all this behind me so I can get back to doing things I like, and that's playing baseball.
In '88, the Mets were going to make up for what they had missed in '87. They were going to rise to the level of 1986. They were going to win again, and they were about to take a very strong lead in the playoff. And Gooden was pitching brilliantly, and he was going to close out the game, and Mike Scioscia hit a home run off him when the game should have been closed out. The Mets lost the game. They lost their edge in the playoff, and they never recovered. And if you draw a timeline through it, we didn't know at the time that this was going to be the torpedo that sank the ship, but it was.
Act 2, Scene 4, late 80s. Darryl Strawberry, burdened by expectations, stands under the glare of the spotlight. Teammates, fans, media watch closely as his days as a New York Met come to an end.
Manny,
The fans played a great part as being part of an extension of the media, what the media wrote. Because I think the media was more pro-Gooden than they were Darryl. And remember the Darryl chat, Darryl, Darryl.
They wanted him to be Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, Paul Bunyan, Jesus Christ. Wasn't going to be that. He was just a left-handed hitter with power.
Towards the end of the '89 season, and Darryl's been hearing this criticism from his teammates, and he's been hearing it from the press, and he's holding a little impromptu press conference right in front of his own locker, in the Mets locker room at Shea Stadium. So there are about 30 people around Darryl, who spends about 10 minutes proclaiming over and over again, people don't understand me, I want to play, my back's acting up, there's nothing I could do. After Darryl finished his press conference, I'm right behind him now. He doesn't know I'm right behind him because I'm headed towards Davy's office, and so is Darryl. Darryl leaves his locker, and he's walking fine. But as he turns that corner, and he's now within potential visual range of Davy's office, Darryl suddenly goes into this limp, almost like Walter Brennan in The Real McCoys, if you remember that show. And he pops his head into Davy's office, and I'm right behind Darryl at the time. And he goes, "Skip, it's acting up, can't do it."
3-2 pitch. Swung on, missed.
The Mets allowed themselves to be outbid by the Dodgers. So in his mind, the right thing to do was to go home, go back to LA, go back to his roots, be the conquering hero.
I don't think the New York Mets front office appreciated Darryl Strawberry for the last 7 years that I've been there, and it's been a real tough situation to go through, and I just wanted to get away from it all and start a new life for myself.
When Darryl Strawberry decided to go back to Los Angeles, to his home, to play there for all the money, he simply accelerated the process of his self-destruction. It's almost always a recipe for disaster, and it was for Strawberry. Everything that was going wrong suddenly went wrong at warp speed.
Act 2, Scene 5, flashback. Crenshaw section of South Central Los Angeles, home of Darryl Strawberry. His mother, Ruby, is a strong presence throughout the scene. Darryl's father enters, then exits.
Crenshaw. It's a whole nother world. People have no idea what that kind of world is like. People in New York City have no idea what that world is like. I mean, you talk about gangs. I've always said that kind of climate is conducive to maturing baseball players because of the warm environment. But man, it's conducive to producing some bad people.
Well, early on, we knew that his mother was a very strong influence in his life. The father really wasn't mentioned at all. He really had dropped out of Darryl's life, and it really wasn't until later on in life that Darryl started connecting the dots and realizing that when he was growing up until the time he was 12, when his dad was in the house, his dad did like to stay out, his dad did like to drink, and there were times, according to Darryl, when he threatened them physically, and he lived in fear of his father. And it wasn't until much later, when Darryl was going through his own problems, that he began to see a cycle there, that the traits of his father had been passed down to him.
Manhood is something you got to do alone. Anybody who has a father can understand. Anybody who doesn't have a father can understand. Baseball was Straw's father, and it was a cruel and abusive one.
There was nobody around Darryl to tell him right from wrong, to protect him, to coddle him. So he was perhaps not quite as shocked that there were drugs around him in '83. And Darryl felt that it was just part of the major league lifestyle.
In '91, when he went to the Dodgers and became a born-again Christian, I think what you saw was a bad actor. You saw someone who wanted it to work, and I think his heart was in the right place, didn't know how to go about it. I think he was looking for a life preserver.
He disappeared before spring training, before the regular season began in '93, and was gone for 24 hours. And that set off all the alarms in LA, to the entire major league community, really. The drugs had finally and officially taken over his life.
Darryl Strawberry has admitted having a substance abuse problem and has requested assistance from the Dodgers in seeking treatment.
He was really into the hardcore use and, was pretty much throwing his entire life away to cocaine and crack, which is why the Dodgers decided they just could not have him around anymore.
Act 2, Scene 7, 1994. 29-year-old Dwight Gooden, no longer Dr. K, stands vulnerable in the spotlight as old demons return.
By 1994, the aura of Doc Gooden, the megastar, had been long busted. And don't forget, he'd also gone through arm problems. He'd had surgery, his rotator cuff was damaged, and clearly by 1994, all you were hoping was that you might, just as a treat, catch a glimpse of what Doc had been 10 years earlier.
After a not particularly good performance in the spring training game, he said, "I miss being great." I thought that was just the way he said it. He paused, he said it with real emotion. "I really miss being great."
Long drive, way back, it might be, it could be, it is! Holy cow!
He says there's no doubt in his mind that among the many contributing factors that led him to feel like he needed drugs or alcohol was this sense of, if he didn't become the greatest of all time, that he would have been letting people down. People he didn't know, people in the streets, people in the stadium.
It was while he was on the disabled list and he was on rehab, baseball rehab, pitching in Binghamton, that he tested positive for the first time after a long time.
Major League Baseball has advised the New York Mets that Dwight Gooden has committed additional violations of both his aftercare program and the Commissioner's Office drug policy.
He got a letter in the mail from Bud Selig telling him that he was thrown out of baseball for a year. And he felt at that point his career was basically done.
Act 2, Scene 8, June 1994. Darryl Strawberry, recently released from drug rehab, enters stage left, wearing a San Francisco Giants uniform.
And one of the days that I met him, Darryl had just come back from the hospital after giving one of his routine urine samples for Major League Baseball. So we sit on his couch and he proceeds to tell me what a great life he has, the clinic, what it's done for him, how it feels to be clean and sober. Well, that very sample that he gave that day when he talked to me was one that came back dirty, tested positive for cocaine. I began to understand the depths of the disease that he had, to think, here's this guy, and I've known him for a long time. He's looking me in the eye and he's telling me what a great life he's got going and how it feels to be clean and sober. Well, in fact, he knows that he's not.
I just think with the right decision and in the right place that I get the help that I need for once and for all, so I can stay off the drugs.
In 1994, it really hit bottom for both of these guys. They were both out of baseball. They'd become footnotes.
Here are two players, whose meteoric rise was absolutely in sync. I mean, it was almost eerie how quickly they took New York by storm together. And now here are both of them succumbing to the same drug problem at the same time. Their fates were like in lockstep.
A good example for Gooden and Strawberry would have been to watch, say, a production of Richard II, who was given everything. He's given basically the crown when he's very young because he's the prince and he blows it. He's a wise guy, brat king, and people take advantage of that void in his self-awareness. Self-awareness is a very important thing in Shakespeare. Who I am, and how that affects my future choices.
Where two raging fires meet together, they do consume the thing that feeds their fury. Though little fire grows great with little wind, yet extreme gusts will blow out fire and all. Taming of the Shrew.
Act 3, Scene 1, the Bronx. Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry, both exiled from baseball, return to New York. They enter wearing pinstripes.
Shakespeare would have to ratchet up his game to describe this scenario. The ill-fated brothers tied together through history in the greatest city in the world, through celebration, through ill-fated affairs, through drug addiction, through a nightmare. And then to surface on the other side of the megalopolis, at the Valhalla of Yankee Stadium.
Steinbrenner was in a sense acting for all fans, you know, in this need to end the play and make it a comedy, not a tragedy.
The Yankees have a large part to do with Doc's revival, if not the saving of his life. I think if you look back at the low point in his life, he says it was the day when he could not come home to his daughter's birthday party. He'd been out using drugs all night, told his wife that he had a flat tire. He checked himself into some cheap little seedy motel in Tampa. Said he lied down on the bed and he was absolutely convinced that this would be the last night that he would ever live. Looked so bad. He said he got up, stood in front of the mirror and said he was looking at a monster.
Doth any here know me? This is not Lear. Doth Lear walk thus? Speak thus? Where are his eyes? Either his notion weakens, his discernings lethargied. Waking. 'Tis not so. Who is it can tell me who I am? King Lear.
That's when he realized that drugs were on the way to taking his family away from him, ending his athletic career, and probably killing him. I think at that point he was able to say, I've got to stop. I have to stop. I have to stop now. And that's when his comeback began.
Act 3, Scene 2. May 14th, 1996, Yankee Stadium. New York Yankees versus Seattle Mariners. Dwight Gooden on the mound. His father, Dan, lies in a hospital bed in Tampa.
Dwight Gooden was very upset. He was very, very close to his father, Dan. You know, I know he'd spent a lot of time in the hospital with him, and his father was in deteriorating health.
He goes to the mound knowing that his father is lying in a Tampa hospital bed, awaiting surgery that night, not sure if his father was going to live or die.
And during the game, he would stand in the runway that runs from the Yankee clubhouse to the dugout. And he'd stand there by himself, and he'd look up in the sky, and he was thinking of his father. And the tears would come to his eyes, just thinking about his father. And it really wasn't until later on he started thinking about the no-hitter.
A high pop-up. He's going to do it. And shortstop Jeter. Jeter on the outfield grass makes the catch. The Yankees win. The Yankees win. And Doc Gooden pitches a no-hitter.
For one night, Dwight Gooden recaptured every New York baseball fan's hopes and dreams and really brought back all that glory that he had brought to New York in the mid-'80s. It was an extraordinary moment.
All day I was just, thinking about my father, and once you get to the ballpark and you go warm up, you just try to focus on the game because I know this is where he wanted me to be.
Great characters in Shakespeare, the people who are truly noble, who make great mistakes like Lear does, like Macbeth does, are redeemed at the end. Those of us who really want to see people, young people who have come to terms with this, the monkeys, the disastrous devils in their closet, we want to see them redeemed.
Act 4, Scene 1. 1998 American League Playoffs. New York Yankees versus Texas Rangers, Arlington, Texas. A weakened Darryl Strawberry is diagnosed with colon cancer.
A colonoscopy was performed today on 36-year-old Darryl Strawberry of the New York Yankees. Biopsies confirmed cancer of the colon.
He'd come to the ballpark to talk to Joe Torre, and he left, and the word spread pretty quickly in the press box into the ballpark that it wasn't very good. I think they said they'd found a spot on his colon, and it just didn't sound very good. At that point, the Yankee family really closed around Darryl.
I realized that I'm dealing with a disease that you know, people catch all the time, and it's unfortunate, like I said, that, you know, that I have to be in this position. But, you know, you got to stand strong, and you just got to believe in what you believe in.
Ball game over. World Series over. Yankees win.
Another ticker tape parade, and you have Darryl Strawberry kind of walking up to the podium, and he's just overcome with emotion, and he's, you know, there just sort of breaks down, can't even talk. He's, you know, just leaning on Joe Torre's shoulder.
It was the guy, you know, who was violent with his wife, and there was the guy who was an addict, and there was the guy who had this magnificent talent, and there was also this guy who would cry on Torre's shoulder, and I think that that was completely genuine.
I think even perhaps that kind of anti-role model with the Yankees may have also served to hurt him, because now he's got the pressure of, you know, once again, expectations, other people looking to him for something. In 1983, it was for 50 home runs. In 1998, it was, you know, cancer survivor tips. That's an extraordinary burden to put on somebody who has proved that when extraordinary burdens are put on his shoulders, he goes haywire.
Yankees outfielder Darryl Strawberry arrested late Wednesday night in Tampa, Florida, and charged with soliciting for prostitution and possession of cocaine.
Act 4, Scene 3, November 3rd, 2000. Darryl Strawberry, wearing an orange prison uniform, stands in Tampa courtroom. Dwight Gooden, upstage, listens as Strawberry tells Judge, "Life hasn't been worth living for me. That's the honest truth. I am not afraid of death."
To see him so defeatist, almost suicidal, in the courtrooms was an amazing thing for people. This is a man who had completely given up hope, who had nothing to live for, in his words, and I think that he became more of a tragic figure than ever before when Darryl Strawberry said, "I have nothing to live for, except for his children." I mean, he had contemplated suicide, but apparently the only thing that was keeping alive were his children.
It's one of the few times he's really being honest. And apart from all the hype, he was being honest. He was acknowledging, you know, the ending to this story might be really horrible.
A lot of people in this courtroom, Mr. Strawberry, be asking the question, why does this happen? You feel like you're special, sir?
No, I don't, sir.
Because this happens to everybody that comes in this courtroom from 50 to 100 times a day. It's the same story, the same miscues, the same problems, the same mistakes.
And if Darryl Strawberry's in that courtroom and his legal life is on the line, especially down in Tampa, well, Dwight's going to be there, and he was. And I think anybody in the courtroom that day will tell you that there's no one who could understand what he's going through more than Dwight could. And, you know, with a different turn of events, maybe it was Dwight in the front of that courtroom and Darryl in the back of the courtroom. But somehow you knew both of them were going to be in that room.
Act 4, Scene 4, March 30th, 2001, Legends Field, Tampa. Darryl Strawberry, off stage in court-ordered rehab. Doc Gooden, center stage, announces his retirement from baseball.
Now mark me how I will undo myself. I give this heavy weight from off my head, and this unwieldy scepter from my hand. The pride of kingly sway from out my heart. With mine own tears I wash away my balm. With mine own hands I give away my crown. Richard II.
I've enjoyed a great career. I'm here today to announce my retirement. It's been an joyous ride. I have no complaints. I've had a great time here coming back to New York.
Gooden retired on a Friday. And that night he went back to his home in St. Petersburg and went out to the balcony of his house and started to cry. In a good way, in a bad way, in a just a total way of release. But also because Darryl was at large.
On the day Dwight Gooden retires, Darryl Strawberry is in trouble again. Authorities in Tampa say there's an arrest warrant out for Strawberry, who left a drug treatment center where he had been serving 2 years house arrest.
I thought he was dead. I figured probably something terrible had happened. I was glad when he surfaced.
Darryl Strawberry has been located. Darryl Strawberry is in a Tampa hospital. Darryl Strawberry is also in custody. 4 days after the former All-Star walked away from his drug treatment center, he turned up at St. Joseph's Hospital and was promptly taken into custody by police on a violation of a probation warrant.
In Darryl Strawberry, you have a character and a series of events that are worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy. You could make him into almost any of those characters or devise a new play for him, if you will, in which a man is expected to be the greatest that perhaps has ever lived at a particular thing and cannot handle the pressure of that, is not built to handle the pressure of that, survives it somehow and gets chance after chance after chance to somehow defeat the enemy, which is not other people's expectations, but his inability to put other people's expectations in their proper perspective, which is to ignore them to the greatest degree possible. He never learns to do this.
Epilogue.
I wasted time, and now doth time waste me. For now hath time made me his numbering clock. My thoughts are minutes, and with sighs they jar their watches unto mine eyes, the outward watch, whereto my finger, like a dial's point, is pointing still, cleansing them from tears. Now, sir, the sound that tells what hour it is are clamorous groans, which strike upon my heart, which is the bell. So sighs and tears and groans show minutes, times, and hours. Richard II.
Doc and Darryl. You know, they were always together. They had it's, first of all, it's just amazing it's happened so quickly. All those things that have happened, you know, the rise, the Rookies of the Year, the World Series championships, the fights, the arguments, drugs, domestic disputes, 15 years, and now it's over?
New York was confusing to them because they felt this great love and they felt this great adulation, and they were very young and they didn't understand what sports was all about. And they felt, people really love me. This whole city loves me. And they confused that with, well, actually, people really loved what they did. People really loved the home runs. People really loved the strikeouts.
One Shakespearean story you can tell is that the sort of poison of drugs and alcohol to which they fell is in a sense the inevitable result of a poisonous culture into which these terribly talented and young men were thrust.
The tragedy will be if the next Doc and Darryl suffer the same fate. And the tragedy then won't be their failings, these two kids. The tragedy then will be that once and for all we know that the society was so unable to reorganize its priorities that it just kept repeating itself.
Darryl and Doc disappointed us in some very profound way, right in the middle of the process where we're still loving them. They come apart. They're not kings and they're not heroes, and their flaws are no different from ours.
Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day until the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out Out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Macbeth.